Project Management Office Overview, Part 1. Hello, I'm John Palermo. I have been in the world of high-tech since the 1980s, starting with advanced electronics in the U.S. Navy, covering radar, communications, SATCOM, and crypto, on through to naval nuclear power. After the Navy, I went into the civilian world of high-tech and have been here ever since. During my time in the civilian world of high-tech, I built out 2 hardware warranty fulfillment shops, one for a small startup and the other for a now famous Fortune 500 company, and have worked across a wide range of positions as a technician, business analyst, project manager, program manager, IT security officer, even loading trucks on a shipping dock, as well as running a repair and manufacturing facility, inventory control and customer service department, on up through 2 engineering programs across multiple divisions with company-wide impacts. Along the way, I developed an obsession with project management offices. What I am about to share with you on project management offices is based on over 20 years of experience. Let's start with a fairly normal project management office organizational structure. Here we have the product management office, the various program management offices, the project activity layer, resource pool, and the project history and resource history databases, and the capability management office. Conceptualizing a project management office for the first time is a heady, exciting experience. Sadly, for those of us who have done this, the idea was out there long before many of us were born. During my efforts with developing my first PMO, I met a retired aerospace engineer, and good Lord did he have a lot to say about it. After losing some of the wind out of my sails, I went back to the drawing board concerning the problems the aerospace industry encountered with the early version of PMO. The aerospace PMO program should have been fine based on some of the assumptions. What the PMO was supposed to accomplish was a standardization of practices, the creation of a common denominator of skills across project managers, engineers, mechanics, and technicians. And all of this was based on the idea that the industry was filled with an extraordinarily high level of professionalism. It was a dismal failure. Here's what happened. Because the PMO concept drives a matrix-type organizational structure versus a traditional hierarchy, accountability went right out the window. Project managers had no means of holding personnel accountable for poor performance. There was no direct reporting structure behind the scenes, hence no chain of authority and literally no chain of responsibility. This was compounded by the tools available in a day. Hard as it might be to believe, email and instant messenger did not exist. Everything was telephone and paper-based. Restrictions concerning what could be discussed over the phone and document handling dramatically slowed and disrupted communications. Needless to say, the aerospace industry abandoned the idea, at least for a few more decades. Flash forward to the 1990s. Flush with .com era cash, I was helping to fund a band. One problem we kept running into was finding replacement guitar players. The average turnaround time was 3 months. Well, I dreamed up a citywide resource management process to shorten the time down to 1 week. The catch? It involved convincing every single band in Austin to participate. Well, I abandoned that idea. A similar problem came up during my efforts as a project manager. I took the band concept, tweaked it for IT, thought I had a brilliant idea, met the retired aerospace project manager, then went back to adjusting for the original problems. The first priority was a process for addressing the communication breakdowns, particularly task assignment and tracking. It's one thing to create a brilliant project plan, schedule, and set of requirements. It's quite another to ensure every person participating in the project knows exactly what they are supposed to be doing. After working out the methods for resource recruitment and task allocation via the web, as well as a means of allowing all participants instant access to all applicable documentation, the next item to address was assignment and task tracking. The answer to this was contained in the allocation tool. Some of the other challenges to work out at the time, keep in mind this was pre-PMP certification days, were high turnover rates since companies were mercilessly stealing resources from each other. Seriously inconsistent skill sets across the board with project managers, developers, security administrators, you name it. And few, if any, serious training programs. Most of the training of the day was in the form of 1 to 3 day everybody gets certified courses. This was solved by building a resource performance history function into the PMO process. Additionally, there was a significant lack of standards, and in the cases where the teams were successful, a serious tendency towards secret sauce approaches. Well, speaking of secret sauce, we did work through all of the issues except one. What to call it? Project Management Office did not seem to effectively capture the idea. Portfolio Project Management Office was too wordy. Portfolio Management Office sounded too financial and again, not encompassing enough. So we were right back to Project Management Office. We got the project to implement the program approved. Found a web development company to help build the system out per our design. And we were off. For about a month. And then came the dot-com crash and the layoffs. One advantage to a massive Fortune 500 company diving into an idea is that everybody is watching. So, flash forward into the 2010s. If you look up PMO on the internet, you will see the ideas all over the place. A PMO Society was even started. Wikipedia has definitions and links to groups and software. If you search for PMO videos, you will find a number of these, though the quality and depth admittedly is what led to this one being created. With regard to tools, Wikipedia has a decent listing I highly recommend. In other words, the idea is still valid. However, it requires a bit more than a PMO tool and a resource pool. When building out a PMO, you will need your processes defined. Business and IT requirements do vary, and a one-size-fits-all approach is not recommended. In fact, it can get downright expensive. Speaking of expenses, as part of the process, you need to define your upper and lower limits not only in terms of project costs and returns, but also in terms of manpower requirements, product types, target markets, technology requirements, and so on. With each of these, you will need to determine what the minimum set of roles are across the PMO. This will not be as simple as, here is a project manager, here is a program manager, here is a developer, etc. You may find that some job functions are better suited under one position versus another, not to mention far more cost-effective. And last, but not least, you will need to clearly define the mission of your PMO. All of this, and I mean all of this, must be done before selecting a PMO tool. So, getting back to the basics. First, you define the overall structure, similar to the high-level chart shown earlier in this presentation. In terms of your org chart and roles, in addition to functions being filled by skills, also focus on checks and balances. How each of the roles support each other and, when necessary, hold each other and the project team accountable matters. The second item that must be defined and is critical to the success of the PMO is the flow of information. This is not limited strictly to the project level. For future efforts, information not only between resources but about resource performance is necessary. And third is the capability management function. In case you are wondering what is meant by this, capability management applies specifically to the management of the processes, controls, and skill sets within a PMO. Capability is what determines the type of projects a PMO can take on and how well these can be executed, as well as whether or not the collective abilities of the PMO continually improve. The business with capability sounds impressive, but to what purpose is all of this? Well, let's go back to the overall purpose of a PMO. The overall purpose of a PMO is to provide top-down transparency throughout the organization, with a very specific focus on ensuring costs are effectively managed and resources efficiently utilized. To support my point, I will walk you through a sample project, or rather walk a sample project through a PMO at a high level. However, before we do this, we'll go ahead and summarize the mission of a PMO. Let us begin with what a PMO should obviously accomplish. PMO Mission, Part A. Facilitation of the development of strong project management skills throughout an organization. Provide oversight and matrix management of all resources working on an organization's projects. Ensure all projects are documented, and appropriately approved. This part of a PMO process, the approval cycle, is critical. Unfortunately, it is also one of the areas most prone to being compromised. Typically, as project management offices are underway carrying out their assignments, groups outside the PMO experiencing pressures of their own will not find the idea that some of their projects are too low a priority to be immediately engaged. Consequently, a high risk of going around the process develops, and with it comes the possibility of hidden costs, schedule conflicts, resource contention, and a whole slew of other headaches that accompany three-ring circus scenarios in the world of project management. When this happens, take it as a sign that the organizational structure of the PMO has not addressed all the business needs. What this means is that the party or parties going around the process might not have been effectively nor fully engaged by their representative program manager, or that the affected area is not well understood by the rest of the business when it comes to prioritization calls. Either way, additional work is required to improve the engagement process. In terms of other issues, such as intentional failure to comply with process, having the PMO director, or VP depending upon your company, directly report to the CEO eliminates most of these problems before they arise. Getting back to the mission of PMOs, PMO Mission, Part B. The most obvious function a PMO is intended to serve is ensuring all PMO projects meet minimum standards in terms of project management methodology, documentation, resource planning and management, as well as, before a project is released, cost-benefit analysis and prioritization. The next two items in the mission of the PMOs might not seem like much, but are key to the ability of the PMO and the overall organization to continually improve. PMO Mission Part C. Ensure the organization gains organizational knowledge from each effort. In other words, in addition to lessons learned, each major project should be contributing to a company's knowledge base. This can take the form of process or procedural updates, training development, user material updates, etc. Even we won't make that mistake again, policy updates count. Next, ensure project resource skills are not only known and historically documented, but that knowledge of these skills is readily accessible. Not knowing who works for your organization and what they can and have done before is an easy way to quickly overload resource labor budgets with excess and redundant personnel. Once you are headed down this path, your organization runs a very high risk of needing to cut labor costs. With this, the last part of the mission of a PMO is ensuring the project workload across the organization is balanced. There is a tendency upon the part of managers, supervisors, and other personnel in leadership positions to move the lion's share of tasks to their most capable people. Unfortunately, this often results in an 80-20 relationship. Basically, 80% of the workload is being pulled by 20% of the people. Regrettably, this situation tends to go unnoticed until one of the 20% individuals leaves the organization. By ensuring the workload is balanced across the organization, aside from avoiding burning out top performers, you will find that the overall project teams are far more productive, effective, and efficient. There will be more on this topic in a later follow-on video. Moving on, we will start with the approval process. There are several ways folks choose to do this, each with their share of pros and cons. The approval process ranges from decision by committee, aka the business council, approach where all the top executives and or their representatives get together and basically push for their division's projects, on through to the concept of a strategic planning office where the selection process is driven by a series of corporate-wide objectives. Recall the vulnerability of this part of the process where folks don't feel appropriately represented, but who, because they are under the gun, feel compelled to go around the PMO process? This is where the function of program management offices comes in. Program managers are intended to be the high-level experts concerning the operations and objectives of each major division within a company. If correctly structured and organized, program management offices and the associated program managers know well in advance what projects are in the queue for review and approval, long before the project proposals reach the decision makers on the business council or in the strategic planning office, and in a few cases may even be the ones writing up the project proposals. Once a project is reviewed and approved, the project is then taken to the appropriate program manager. The program manager, if he or she has not already done this, creates a tentative project schedule and allocates tentative resources. The intent here is to identify early on any potential resource contentions and/or skill set gaps, as well as reset expectations concerning target date in case of shared resources or a pending recruitment campaign for new resources. Next, depending upon the PMO's process flow, the program manager may be required to draft the initial high-level documents. What this applies to is literally anything that will help clarify the objectives and scope of the project to the soon-to-be assigned project team. Although scope management is a key requirement from all project managers, clearly identifying the scope ahead of time, rather than leaving the entire discovery process up to the project team, not only saves time, it means resources can quickly engage and deliver efforts. Now this is where it might get a little tricky, given that there aren't too many program managers. If a program manager does not have the time, nor the skills necessary to accomplish this, the first priority is to bring in a business analyst with a subject matter expertise to address this task. Based on the findings of the business analyst, subject matter expert, or in some cases engineer, it may be necessary to resubmit the project for approval. Do not expect happy days when this situation arises, and be prepared to justify the decision. Also, keep in mind this is part of the checks and balances to the PMO process. Once everything checks out, meaning the project manager's availability and expertise has been verified, the project manager's allocation to the project is confirmed. The project manager then officially takes over the project. The program manager will sit down with the project manager and review the draft schedule prepared and/or revised by the project manager, review the initial resource allocations, and help coordinate adjustments accordingly. The program manager will then, in conjunction with the project manager, schedule and hold the initial internal project kickoff meetings, after which the program manager announces the official engagement of the project. From this point forward, the program manager serves a supporting role, acting as a subject matter expertise consultant, mentor, and in cooperation with the project manager, develops and regularly publishes status updates per schedule. During the project, the program manager will regularly meet with the project manager to review the status of the project, as well as regularly follow up with the project team. There's a good deal more, but we will leave it at this. If your company sells software as a service or any similar product or service, next comes the client kickoff meetings. The same general process applies to internal clients. Normally, a series of meetings between sales and the client take place beforehand, during which the client's expectations can vary wildly. Although wild expectations are by no means preferred, the client kickoff meeting is where the rubber meets the road, and while impressing the client with the project team's organization and snap, the project manager and participating members of the team need to effectively manage the client's expectations. This is the point where the scope of the project and the client expectations can differ dramatically, so be careful. As a part of this process, during the meeting, the draft proposal, requirements, and statement of work and/or any other documents, contracts, agreements need to be reviewed and confirmed with the client. Even though a schedule has already been tentatively established, this all takes place before setting anything in stone with the client. If your project manager has a tendency to spill the beans and freely commit to anything without first clearing it with the subject matter experts on the project team, this will show up in the form of significant scope creep, unclear requirements, cost overruns, severe schedule slips, and a long list of other troubles accompanied with a long list of reasons all pointing away from the project manager. These are red flags that should not be ignored and which will keep coming up in nearly every project that type of project manager takes on. Getting back on track, following any updates, the project team then holds an internal design review. This is the point where differences between the draft, statement of work, and project scope are captured, and all related materials and schedules updated accordingly, along with the bill. If the changes are too significant in nature, the project manager needs to immediately alert the program manager and the sales representative. After this, a standard escalation and decision matrix should take over. Shocking as some sales personnel may find this, there are situations where it is not only okay, but necessary to tell the client you will be turning down the job. One example would be where the customizations required by the client take your base product or service outside the function and/or market intended by your company. Too many product or service variations also means long-term support requirements that might be at risk of being unsupportable. However, presuming this is not the case, once all the related materials and/or documents are updated, the project manager schedules another review presentation with the client. Technically, this should be a formality. By the time the meeting is scheduled, all the related materials and client-facing documents should have been reviewed and unofficially approved by the client and/or the client's representative. However, presuming this is not the case, once all the related materials and/or documents are updated, the project manager schedules another review presentation with the client. Technically, this should be a formality. By the time the meeting is scheduled, all the related materials and client-facing documents should have been reviewed and unofficially approved by the client and/or the client's representative. After the presentation, if there is one, once the statement of work is signed, the project is officially engaged. Now that the project is officially engaged, the project resources are officially allocated and scheduled. What this should mean is that the resources allocated to the project are not available for other creative or emergency assignments during the time slots to which they have been allocated. The next topic is not really a matter of process flow as much as software project development philosophy, which has led to some interesting debates between the proponents of each approach. There are a number of project management methodologies. Two examples at nearly extreme opposites of the spectrum are Agile and Waterfall. Which one applies to a project, despite philosophies, truly depends upon the actual needs of the project and the speed of delivery required. Here are rules of thumb to go by when trying to decide which one applies. If the project is complex and long-term, not to mention mistakes can be costly, your best option will be the waterfall approach with a very tight SDLC, software development lifecycle. If the project revolves around something similar to an online advertising business, where the supporting technical infrastructure is already deployed and well established, not to mention ads are deployed quickly, basically within a few days, Agile is perfect for a fast review and fast deployment cycle. Agile is meant for low complexity, fast turnaround efforts. Hope this helps. As our example project is being worked on, here are a few things that should be happening. First, upper management and program managers should be able to check in on the project from time to time without necessarily interrupting anyone. This goes back to the top-down transparency aspect. What this means is that the CEO should be able to go into the project folder, see what the status of the project is, review the associated documents, and check on resource assignments. This may sound like Big Brother in 1984, but remember, this is a business where folks are accountable for the deliverables being worked on by personnel reporting to them. They have a vested interest. This ability should also prevent upper management from walking into the middle of the project team and interrupting the workflow as a result of trying to get a clear picture of what is happening. Additionally, program managers should be able to see resource availability in relation to the project. The intent, of course, being that resources are not over nor under allocated. This also means program management and senior management should be able to review a resource's assigned workload versus their completed workload. Any project manager worth his or her salt will also be watching this like a hawk, and where feasible, especially with high-level performers who tend to finish tasks early, adjusting assignments to ensure a steady workflow, as well as ensuring the project stays on schedule. As tasks are completed, the tool used by the PMO and the various project teams should capture assignment status. This, in turn, should feed into an overall project status that program and project managers can use to compare the actual versus the planned status of a project, as well as forecasting a project's target completion date. As assignments are completed, or key milestones or target dates approach, the tool used by the PMO should issue automated alerts. As an example, if an assignment is within a day of its target date and has not been completed, a schedule risk alert should go out. So here we are. The project was successfully delivered. The client is happy, sales is happy, and bonuses all around for the entire project team. Are we done? No, not at all. Remember that part of the mission that talked about continuous improvement? In addition to the process for managing and tracking the projects, it is also critical that there are a series of formal steps to close out a project. In the event of client-based projects, this means a transition process over to the support or maintenance division begins. If this has not happened already, this is when the client is introduced to the support groups and the support process they will be using from this point forward. What happens if you do not do this? Remember that project manager who is always getting calls at his or her desk directly from the clients and appears to be having a tough time completing his or her work on time? Bingo! Also, before you let your resources go, there are a few things they need to do first. In fact, making these a condition of receiving their bonus checks will help. First, and quickly, do not wait a week. Pull the entire team together and start walking through everything that went right and everything that went wrong with the project. Look for potential changes in procedure and/or policy. Be careful though. There are times where this can turn into a finger-pointing and shouting session. Remind everyone that as a team you are looking for ways to improve the process. Afterward, have the team submit their evaluations on each other's performance. There are different ways to measure this, including having the evaluations based on job titles instead of names. This information will feed into the Capability Management Program Office, where it will be evaluated for gaps in skills and possible training opportunities. Any metric that requires a human being is known as a subjective metric. These will be complemented by objective metrics. Objective metrics are hard measures, such as target date versus actual delivery date, and the list of metrics goes on. The idea, as mentioned before, is continuous improvement. What the PMO should be looking for are potential improvements in terms of quality of the process with an eye on effective cost management and efficient resource utilization. This concludes part 1 of this Project Management Office course. Thank you all very much for your time, and if opportunity permits, know that I look forward to working with you.